In the vast wilderness of Kenya's Amboseli National Park, where the savanna stretched endlessly beneath the watchful gaze of Mount Kilimanjaro, lived a man named Tau Nkosi. For nearly 2 decades, Tau had served as a senior ranger in the park, dedicating his life to protecting the magnificent creatures that roamed these lands. His dark skin was weathered by the relentless African sun, each line on his face telling a story of dedication, danger, and an unbreakable bond with the wilderness. Born in a small village just outside the park's boundaries, Tau had grown up listening to his grandfather's tales of the great beasts that ruled the savanna. These stories had ignited a passion that led him away from the traditional path of farming and into the challenging life of wildlife conservation. Now, at 45, he was one of the most respected rangers in all of Kenya, known for his uncanny ability to track animals and his profound understanding of their behaviors. The summer of 2023 had been particularly harsh in Amboseli. A prolonged drought had parched the landscape, forcing animals to travel farther in search of water and food. This desperation made them vulnerable, not only to natural predators, but also to those who sought to profit from their misery. Poaching incidents had increased along the park's borders, keeping Tau and his team constantly vigilant. One sweltering afternoon in late August, while conducting a patrol along the park's northern boundary, Tau noticed something unusual through his binoculars. A cluster of vultures circling low over a dense thicket of acacia trees about a kilometer away. Years of experience had taught him that such gatherings often signaled death, or impending death, and required immediate investigation. "Looks like trouble," he murmured to himself, wiping sweat from his brow. He radioed his position to headquarters before steering his dusty patrol vehicle toward the gathering birds. Parking about 200 meters from the site, Tau proceeded on foot, his weathered boots making little sound on the parched earth. He carried his tranquilizer rifle slung across his back, a precaution he never neglected, even after all these years. As he drew closer, the unmistakable sound of a large animal in distress reached his ears, a deep, guttural groan that sent shivers down his spine despite the oppressive heat. Tau advanced cautiously, parting the tall, golden grass with practiced hands. When he finally glimpsed the source of the disturbance, his breath caught in his throat. There, entangled in an illegal wire snare, lay one of the most magnificent creatures he had ever encountered, a massive male lion with a mane so dark it appeared almost black in the dappled shade. This was no ordinary lion. Tau recognized him immediately as Makubu, the Thunderer, a legendary figure in Amboseli. Researchers had tracked his movements for years, documenting his reign over a vast territory and multiple prides. Local villagers spoke of him with a mixture of fear and reverence, believing him to possess the spirit of a great warrior. His distinctive dark mane and the notch in his right ear made him unmistakable. Now, this majestic creature lay trapped and vulnerable, his powerful hind leg caught in the cruel grip of a poacher's snare. The wire had cut deeply into his flesh, and dried blood matted his tawny fur. Despite his predicament, the lion's amber eyes burned with fierce defiance when they locked onto Tau. "Ah, Makubu," Tau whispered in his native tongue. "What trouble have you found yourself in?" The lion growled weakly, attempting to rise before collapsing again, his massive head falling heavily to the ground. Tau could see that the animal was severely dehydrated, his tongue lolling from his mouth, his breathing labored. The ranger estimated that Makubu had been trapped for at least 2 days, judging by the condition of the wound and the lion's deteriorating state. Tau knew the protocol for such situations: contact headquarters, request a veterinary team, and maintain surveillance from a safe distance until professional help arrived. But as he raised his radio to his lips, he hesitated. The nearest veterinary unit was stationed over 4 hours away, and given Makubu's condition, the proud lion might not survive that long under the merciless African sun. "This once old friend, I must break the rules," Tau decided, lowering his radio. From his pack, he withdrew a precious vial of tranquilizer and a single dart, emergency supplies he carried for dire situations. With practiced movements, he loaded his rifle and took careful aim. The dosage had to be perfect. Too little would be ineffective. Too much could be fatal, especially for an already weakened animal. The dart found its mark in Makubu's shoulder. The lion roared in surprise, a shadow of his once mighty voice before the sedative began to take effect. Tau watched as the great cat's eyelids grew heavy, his massive head gradually lowering until he lay still on the dusty ground, his sides rising and falling in the deep rhythm of sedated sleep. Only when he was certain that Makubu was fully unconscious did Tau approach, still moving with cautious respect. Even sedated, a lion commanded deference. Kneeling beside the fallen king, Tau examined the snare. It was a cruel device, a thick wire noose attached to a metal stake driven deep into the ground. The design was familiar. It bore the hallmarks of a notorious poaching ring that had been targeting lions for their teeth, claws, and bones, which fetched high prices in illegal wildlife markets. "Bastards," Tau muttered, his face darkening with anger. Reaching into his pack, he withdrew a pair of heavy-duty wire cutters and began the delicate process of freeing the trapped limb. The wire had cut deeply, revealing raw flesh that would certainly become infected if not treated. From his field medical kit, Tau extracted antiseptic, antibiotics, and bandages. With gentle hands that belied his strength, he cleaned the wound, applied a generous layer of antibiotic ointment, and wrapped the injured leg as best he could. It was far from ideal treatment, but it might give Makubu a fighting chance until his body's remarkable healing abilities took over. "You are strong, Makubu," he said softly as he worked. "You have survived many seasons. Survive this one too." As he finished tending to the wound, Tau noticed the tranquilizer's effects would soon begin to wear off. The dosage he had administered was deliberately light, given the lion's weakened state. He needed to retreat to safety before Makubu regained consciousness. Gathering his supplies, Tau backed away slowly, keeping his eyes fixed on the sleeping lion. When he had put about 40 meters between himself and Makubu, he turned to make his way back to his vehicle. The afternoon was waning, and he needed to report the incident to headquarters before darkness fell. That's when the unexpected happened. A low, rumbling growl froze him in his tracks. Turning slowly, Tau found himself facing not one, but 3 lionesses who had emerged silently from the surrounding thicket. Their tawny bodies were tense, muscles rippling beneath sleek coats as they advanced in a coordinated semicircle that effectively cut off his path to the vehicle. Cold fear washed over him. These were Makubu's pride members, Nyota, Imara, and Malaika. He recognized them from his years of observation. Females who had lived alongside the great male for years, hunting, raising cubs, and defending their territory alongside him. Now they had mistaken Tau's intervention for an attack on their king, and their intentions were clear in the predatory focus of their amber eyes. The lead lioness, Nyota, recognizable by a distinctive white patch on her chest, dropped into a hunting crouch, her tail flicking ominously back and forth. The other 2 spread out to flank him, a hunting strategy Tau had witnessed countless times, but never from this perilous perspective. Tau knew that running was futile. Even in his prime, he could never outpace a lioness, capable of reaching speeds of 50 miles per hour in short bursts. His tranquilizer rifle was spent, and even if it weren't, he couldn't possibly sedate all 3 before at least one reached him. His sidearm, loaded with noise-making blanks designed to scare off aggressive animals, would likely provoke rather than deter them in this situation. Drawing on every ounce of his experience, Tau stood his ground, making himself appear as large as possible by spreading his arms. He began to speak in a calm, steady voice, a technique he had employed successfully in past confrontations with aggressive animals. "I am not your enemy," he said, maintaining unwavering eye contact with Nyota. "I have helped him, not harmed him." Nyota advanced another step, her growl deepening to a threat that required no translation. Behind him, Tau heard the rustling sound of Makubu beginning to stir from his sedated state. The situation was rapidly deteriorating. He was caught between the awakening male and his protective females, with no clear path to safety. As the seconds stretched into agonizing minutes, Tau maintained his position, his voice never faltering, despite the fear that threatened to overwhelm him. He spoke to the lionesses as equals, as fellow guardians of the great Makubu, hoping against hope that somehow they would sense his intentions. He would have died without help, Tau continued, his voice steady despite his pounding heart. The wire was killing him slowly. Look at him now. He lives because of me. Makubu was now fully awake, though still groggy from the sedative. The great lion rose unsteadily to his feet, shaking his magnificent mane as if to clear the fog from his mind. His amber eyes, once glazed with pain, now shone with renewed clarity as they fixed on Tau. The ranger remained perfectly still as Makubu limped forward, approaching him from behind. Tau could feel the lion's hot breath on his back, could hear the heavy panting just inches away. In that moment, time seemed to stop. The world narrowed to just man and beast, two beings facing a moment of truth in the ancient dance of predator and prey. What happened next defied everything Tau knew about lion behavior. Instead of attacking, Makubu circled around to face him, his massive head level with Tau's chest. The lion studied him with intelligent eyes that seemed to hold a depth of understanding no scientific paper had ever documented. Then, to Tau's utter astonishment, Makubu pressed his forehead against the ranger's trembling hand, a gesture reminiscent of the head-bumping behavior lions use to greet members of their pride. A deep, rumbling purr vibrated through the air, felt more than heard. Tau remained frozen, scarcely daring to breathe as the connection between man and beast transcended the natural order. After what seemed like an eternity, but was likely only seconds, Makubu turned away and limped toward his waiting females, who had ceased their threatening posture and now watched with what appeared to be confusion. The lion paused beside Nyota, touching his muzzle to hers in greeting. Then, with a final glance back at Tau, he led his pride away through the tall grass, his injured leg already bearing weight, though gingerly. Only when the lions had disappeared from sight did Tau release the breath he'd been holding. His legs trembled so violently that he sank to his knees in the dust, overcome by the magnitude of what had just transpired. In all his years in the wild, through countless encounters with Africa's most dangerous creatures, he had never experienced anything like this moment, a connection that defied explanation. When he finally regained his composure, Tau made his way back to his vehicle on unsteady legs. As he started the engine, he glanced toward the horizon where the lion pride had disappeared. There, silhouetted against the setting sun, stood Makubu on a distant ridge, his distinctive profile unmistakable even at a distance. The lion's gaze seemed fixed on Tau, a final acknowledgement before he turned and vanished into the gathering dusk. Back at headquarters, Tau filed his report, carefully documenting the location of the snare and the evidence of poaching activity. He mentioned treating an injured lion, but kept the more extraordinary details of the encounter to himself, knowing they would likely be dismissed as the fanciful imaginings of a ranger who had spent too many years in the sun. In the weeks that followed, Tau increased his patrols in the northern sector, partly to monitor Makubu's recovery, and partly to search for signs of the poachers who had set the snare. He found and disabled 6 more traps, potentially saving countless animals from suffering the same fate. As for Makubu, reports from other rangers and researchers confirmed that the great lion was recovering well. The wound on his leg was healing cleanly, and he had resumed his duties as the pride's protector, successfully fending off a challenge from a younger male just 3 weeks after his rescue. Most remarkably, whenever Tau's patrol vehicle approached their territory, the lion pride would appear on the nearest ridge, watching but never threatening. Makubu would often stand at the front, his dark mane ruffling in the breeze, as if acknowledging the human who had saved his life. One evening, about 2 months after the rescue, Tau was returning from a late patrol when he spotted a familiar silhouette on a rocky outcrop near the road. Bringing his vehicle to a stop, he watched as Makubu descended from his perch and approached the car, moving with only the slightest hint of a limp. Against all protocol and better judgment, Tau stepped out of his vehicle. He stood motionless as the lion approached, coming within 10 feet before stopping. Man and beast regarded each other in silence, two beings who had shared a moment that transcended the natural order. "You are looking well, old friend," Tau said softly. Makubu rumbled a response, a sound somewhere between a purr and a growl. Then, with deliberate movements, the lion turned and walked away, pausing once to look back before disappearing into the gathering darkness. The story of Tau and Makubu gradually spread throughout the park and nearby villages. Some dismissed it as legend, while others, especially the elders from Tau's village, saw it as confirmation of ancient beliefs about the spiritual connection between humans and the great beasts of the savannah. For Tau, the experience changed something fundamental in his approach to conservation. While he had always respected the animals under his protection, he now understood on a deeper level that they were not merely creatures to be managed, but beings with an intelligence and emotional capacity that science was only beginning to acknowledge. 6 months after the rescue, Tau was promoted to Chief Conservation Officer for Amboseli, a position that allowed him to implement stronger anti-poaching measures throughout the park. On the evening of his promotion ceremony, as colleagues celebrated around a campfire at headquarters, he slipped away briefly to the observation platform that overlooked the savannah. In the distance, illuminated by the full moon, stood a now familiar figure, Makubu, his mane silvered by moonlight, watching from beyond the boundaries that separated the human world from his domain. Flanking him were Nyota, Imara, and Malaika, along with 2 small cubs that had been born since the rescue. Tau raised his hand in silent greeting. The lion remained for a moment longer, then turned and melted into the darkness of the savannah he ruled. 2 different worlds, briefly connected by an act of compassion that had changed them both forever. In the years that followed, whenever new rangers joined the team at Amboseli, Tau would take them to the northern boundary and tell them his story, not as a tale of conquest or dominance over nature, but as a lesson in respect and coexistence. "We are not masters of these creatures," he would say, gesturing toward the vast savannah that stretched before them. "We are guardians of their right to live wild and free. And sometimes, if we are very fortunate, they choose to acknowledge that bond in ways we could never imagine." And somewhere in the vast expanse of Amboseli, Makubu continued to roam with his pride, carrying with him the memory of the human who had freed him from a trap and earned the unexpected gift of a lion's gratitude. A moment of connection between 2 worlds that were meant to remain apart, yet somehow found common ground in a single act of compassion.